Alright everyone, LEGO is back with a small but very satisfying project in GC, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but first let's talk about what's happening on screen. I have taken the liberty of scouring the wikis to find the models of the vehicles used in the desert chase scene in the first Indiana Jones movie. So that's what I'm lining up here roughly. Found some profile pictures from the side of the various trucks, or at least as close as I could get. Some of them are toy models, but to each their own, and it's good enough for me. Having established the ground and the placement of the vehicles relative to each other, I'm now doing a quick and dirty auto trace, and I am settling on two tones from the start. Otherwise, this is going to be extra grungy, and I can always change my mind later and merge them if I want to. But I feel like I need the extra details provided by the two-tone to add some relief on the wheels positions, maybe the doors, some of the shine, and it gives a little bit of depth. The truck that brought me the most trouble was the actual truck that carries the Ark, because the only good picture I found from the side was this old grainy one where you see the truck sort of from the side, and I had a lot of trouble with making auto trace of that, so that was the only issue I had to fix manually. And for some of the other trucks, some of the other vehicles, sorry, I did some minor modifications. This combat motorbike thing with the side saddle had a machine gun on it, and the original didn't in the film, so I'm removing that. Removing the license plate as well. In general, I'm moving most of the text away, so you don't have any text. Now, the only actual screenshot I got from the movie was of him briefly appearing in a frame or two from the side, riding the horse. It's actually surprisingly hard to find pictures of Indiana Jones riding a horse as seen from the side. It's usually shot either close up or in front of him. So this was the only thing I really had to go off of, and the frame intersected some of the horse model, so I made up a leg and prayed for the best. It's good enough for me, as it were. And otherwise, there's not really a lot to it. I made a rough trace of Indiana himself. I'm probably going to change the hat profile a bit because it looked a little silly, but more or less, I'm content to just do a quick and dirty shadow project here instead of my usual meticulous hand-pointed thing, because the shadows really aren't the focus of the work. They're just there to provide the scene, and there's no need to look too closely at them. Back to the truck here, I have a little bit of a problem with the shadow as well, so at this stage I am mostly consigned to doing a manual trace and then using the already established second tone relief here for the contrast. So I am making up the actual canvas separately because it has the most important curves. That's what I really need to establish. You can't really tell that it's a canvas if it's just a pure shadow, so I needed that contrast to show the contours of the actual cloth. So boring shadow project aside, this is obviously the desert chase from the first movie. I have the Ark safely hidden inside the second truck, and I'm going to add some people very roughly later on so it doesn't look totally empty. And then I'm gonna have a, to me at least, very iconic quote at the top superimposed on this whole scene. So I'm very excited to do that, but I have to get this framework to work first. Otherwise, I don't know how much space I've got, and I don't know how my composition is going to take out. So last steps here, I am prettying up some of the wheels because it was pretty rough, and I am reducing some of the contrast so it's not a complete mess of a spec. But in the end, I think I got what I wanted out of this, at least on the surface level. And the relief color right now, I'm just choosing a very dark gray, so you have the contrast, so you can see the contrast. But once we enter the environment and start to actually add color to the scene, which I'm about to do now, I am going to have to change that gray to something else because it doesn't really fit in. I'm going to use a dark tan or very dark brown or something instead. Now, foreground, pretty simple. I have a desert. The background was a little bit more ambiguous. I first wanted to see sort of the same color gradient in the sky as well. Sort of not quite sunrise or sundown, but just that desert sky thing. And I needed some mountains in the background to top it off and give me some depth and the scene. But once I realized the finer points of this, I decided it was too much of the same gradient. There was not enough contrast, and it just blended. It didn't blend together, but there wasn't enough variation here to make it interesting. Especially because I also decided from day one that when I got to the text, I would absolutely have to do the text in the iconic Indiana Jones gradient, the dark burnt orange to almost hot white. So it was going to be a lot of the same gradient imposed on other gradients. So I decided to change it to the more natural blue sky, which, was apparent in the chase scene as well. It was daytime and all. So it gave me some much needed contrast. Now, I always wanted to add some dust because this is a very dusty thing. There's everyone is throwing up sand and dust in their chase. It's a way for me to give some dynamic input on this. Makes everything a little bit more moving. Makes it look like something is actually happening instead of just a static image. I'm not incredibly happy with the dust effects, but it got the job done. Is probably the best I can tell. And I used the opportunity as well to add some dusty cloudiness to the foreground instead of an actual gradient. Just breaking it up a little bit. Now I'm adding some really cursed people, just totally freehand. I'm focusing most on the shape of the hat, and from the hat, I just try to make a person-ish something, because the profile of this matters mostly in you just need to recognize it's a human being. And the easiest way to recognize a human being from the side like this is to have a hat, frankly. So I made some scuffed people proportional-ish to the vehicles themselves. I used Indiana as a scale, sort of. Now I made the little copy of the actual gradient there as best I could with the pick color tool. And now we are almost ready to start the actual text. I just need to do some backups of the gradients first. I decided to make the mountain range a little lighter to just sort of push it off from the ground. And now we're in the text phase. I'm not going to spoil what it says. That's an exercise for the reader. But you can probably follow along here. You have the key right there on the screen. You can just pause and read. And I'm just puzzling this out as I go, as is my usual deal. I'm making the proto text now, just raw shapes, no modifiers except for those easily changed or resized. And I know vaguely that I want to fill up the entire space up here because I want this quote to be shouted from the rooftops, so to speak. And I thought it would be really cool to have the text bigger than the chase, like this big looming statement hanging over the chase itself, which is what I decided on doing. Now, GC, I've talked about that a lot before, especially in relation to Indiana Jones. I've used that that particular language with Indiana Jones more than once before, and there's not a lot to it, especially not because it's a fairly simple quote. So there's not a lot of finagling around with the composition. It's mostly linear from one end to the other, and I have some very simple punctuation to go with it. I love the punctuation in GC. It's really, really approachable, but very powerful at the same time, depending on how you wrap it up in the text itself. in the same vein that Time Water does it, except less abstract, and actually kind of also the same way Resolonian does it. I can't decide if I got inspiration from Resolonian when doing this, but I probably did to an extent. But also Time Water had an influence as well. It was really a mix of those two, I think, that inspired the GC originally. So anyway, final touches here, almost done. I had a simple color code for some of the modifiers and some of the lines that I would have to add. But at this stage, I am mostly done with everything except the lines, and I had one idea for one of the lines at least to become the iconic whip. And GC isn't really big on curved lines, but as long as you start off straight, it's okay. Is the rule I ended up deciding on when I expanded the system a little bit a couple of years ago. This is to mimic, or at least a nod of respect towards Clockwork Gallifreyan, which has that same unspoken aesthetic rule of lines being mostly straight and ending and starting straight. So I had a mock-up of the whip down there. I had the necessary line work, and now I am just putting up the few lines there are. There's not a ton of lines in this, so every line counts in that regard. If I had 20 lines, I probably wouldn't have bothered with most of them. But when there's only 3-4 lines, I can afford to really go all out and make those stand out. And I decided to change the whip shade a little bit at the last moment. It looked a bit too straight, and I fixed that. Now we put on the actual gradient, and you can see how I envisioned this being. If the sky had been a burnt orange as well, it would have been too much orange and golden skies as well. So I'm pretty happy with the decision to change it to a blue background up top. And now I just need to create a little bit of relief so you can see the text more clearly against the background. I decided to add a little bit of a shadow, and then I singled out the whip because it really didn't look right in the same color gradient as the rest. So I made it brown, and I tried to mix the handle in there with the text itself. Ended up just going with a solid black, and the whip itself has a texture on, like it's a braided cord, right, more or less. And the fastest, easiest way to simulate that for me at the moment was to just take a checkered pattern and superimpose it on top. And that's where I ended off. This is the final design, but then at the last minute I remembered to change the gradient of the actual trucks. I add a little bit of extra dust at the bottom to break up the foreground, and then I also decided to mix up the sky a little bit to add a hint, just a hint of that same golden back in the background, almost as if the dust in the very, very background of the mountains is also rising up slowly. But changing the relief of the caravan there is really, it added a little bit of something. And I, at the very last second, decided to add a little bit of extra stuff on the ground there just to make it less smooth. And looking back at that, I'm pretty happy with the background stuff. I'm also very happy with the text, and you can clearly see where this is and what this is, and that's really all that matters. So, little quick 3-hour project, and pretty happy with it. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you another time.